How you doing, Miss Morgan? You're welcome to the show.
I'm very well, Tommy, but do call me Maureen, please.
I certainly will, Maureen, no problem. Just being polite, that's all. Tell me, Maureen, are you a native of Ballinascreen?
Well, I'll make it as short as I can. I was actually born in a townland of Knocknabowl, which is in County Kerry. The village is a mile and a half away. It's called Ballydesmond, and it is in County Cork. So I always deeply am rooted in Kerry. However, I spent much of my younger days travelling because my father was, we moved around quite a bit because of his employment. So I was born in Kerry, lived in County Limerick, educated in County Limerick. Thereafter went to London with my parents to live, and then I went off to Africa. So a long answer to your question, but I was born in Kerry.
Well, Maureen, you mentioned Africa. Were you on holiday, or was there something more sinister behind it?
Oh, not sinister at all. Let me see. I went to Africa in 1966. The 1st of January, I took off from London Heathrow Airport, and I spent 3 years out there working for the Malawi government, which Malawi had just become independent and was now in the process of becoming a republic, so they were recruiting a lot of expatriate workers to go out there and, I suppose, help with the transition. So I was one of those lucky ones. And off I went, and I spent 3 years there. Now that was an amazing 3 years. I had incredible experiences, both from a working perspective and from the point of view of really having a very grounded experience of what life was in Africa, because expatriates who live there have a very privileged lifestyle, but sometimes they don't get in behind the scenes and get to the natives and get to the villages and to see exactly who the people are, what they're about, and what their lifestyles and culture are all about either. So I was working in a very privileged job. I was this small young lady or young girl from Kerry, and I was working in the Parliament building in Zomba, which was then the capital of Malawi. And I worked for the speaker, the guy that wears the wig. And I thought that was an incredible job to be doing. For somebody who hadn't gone to university or any of those high-powered education. But it was amazing how that particular job led me to a very, I would say, I have to put the word providential experience, because I was away up on business with my boss and other members of Parliament from England. And we were in a place called Mzuzu in the northern part of Malawi. And there I met a priest, a white father, who turned out to be a cousin of my mother's from Ballydesmond. So here in the middle of Africa, I meet somebody who's related to me. And that meeting was providential because he in turn invited me back to spend time at their mission. And the mission that they had there in Mzuzu was the Medical Missionaries of Mary, who have their headquarters in Drogheda in County Louth, had a hospital called St. John's. And I stayed with them, and I worked with them in the office in the hospital. And so therefore I was introduced to Africa in its real state, behind the scenes, no pomp and ceremony, just absolutely meeting the people in their homes, which were round shacks in those days. I was privileged to be with the sister doctor from, she came from Ireland, Sister Hilary, and she took me out, and she actually showed me operations. I actually helped her to deliver babies, and I'm not even a nurse. So that was that experience, and I went back to there a lot. A second experience during that 3-year period was that I went to what was then known as Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. And again, met sisters from Limerick, the Blue Sisters, who ran a big hospital in what was then the capital city. Now it's called Harare. It was then Salisbury. And again, that introduction to the mission experience. So I completed my contract in Malawi, and I came home, and I came for a 6-month holiday period, which was the end of our contracts, and I was to go back in the January. However, during that 3-month period, I came back to Northern Ireland, and that's where my connection with Northern Ireland comes from, because my dad comes from Mononina, and we were all back as a family from London because we had American visitors. 4 members of the family from America were visiting Mononina. So we all had a family reunion, and I was part of that. And during that period, I met Joe Morgan from Moydamlet, and we got married and had 5 children and all the rest of all that goes on in life. And then when all the children were schooled and educated and away, I got this idea back in my head, the mustard seed that had been laid way back in the 60s was beginning to come to the fore again. So in 2004, I set off on this trip, and I call it my millionaire's trip as a pauper, because it was just amazing. The end sight for me was to go back to Malawi. However, what I did was I went to New York, visited my son and my relatives. I went on to Phoenix in Arizona, friends and family. I went on to Sydney and Canberra in Australia, friends and family. I went from there to Perth in Western Australia, family, had a wedding there, family wedding, and then I flew up to Lilongwe for my long-awaited return to Malawi. And in my head, what I went there for was to maybe seek out an opportunity to work on the mission field for a year, to do some voluntary work, because of the original experience that was there in the back of my mind. So there we are. I'm back in Malawi, and I'm looking for this experience, and I'm revisiting people 38 years after my first visit there. And there are still people who are living there and have raised their families and have remained as expatriate workers and employees of the government. And I met by absolutely, and I use the word providential again, because I feel for me, those are my life's experiences. The significant people you meet that bring significant events into your life. I met this lady, Lucy Finch, a nurse, Malawian by birth, married to an Englishman, and they both had served various overseas employment positions during their lifetime. And now, when I met them, they had just retired 2 years previously back to Malawi. So I was introduced to this lady and visited her and met her, and then she was telling me what she was doing. And she had been back in England. She had trained as a nurse up in Scotland, in Edinburgh. She had become a palliative care specialist nurse. Then, as part of her husband's work, they had ended up in Uganda, where she met an Irish nun called Sister Anne Merriman, who was a doctor. She was Dr. Anne Merriman. And she was running the Hospice Africa Uganda, which was palliative care for the local people. And she had developed quite a big hospice, I suppose one would call it. So Lucy Finch, the lady that I'm talking about that I met, spent 5.5, 6 years working as a volunteer sister nurse, developing her skills in palliative care and learning. And that's what she brought back to Malawi when she retired there with her husband. That we would get up, they would have breakfast, and then we would go out to the house, and there would be a line of people, a line of villagers outside the house, and they were coming to see Lucy, the nurse. And in Africa, when you're out in the bush, a nurse is a doctor. Everybody comes for healing. And she was beginning to buy medicines and facilitate, their sicknesses. And then when they were really sick, she and her husband would drive them to the local hospital, which was 25 kilometres. That's what they use out there, kilometres. And I was just amazed at what I saw. These two people had retired, and here they were giving freely of their time, expertise, and I was really taken by it. So having been there for a few days, now I was going to be a month in Malawi at that time. That was the period that I had kind of allocated to be there, to do my recce on finding someplace. But when I met her, I thought, do you know something? I really need to go back home and do some fundraising and get some money for Lucy to do the work she's about. So when my month was over and I'd done all my visitations and done a whole lot of, just going back and seeing the places that I had been for the 3 years previously, which was now much further south from where I was actually. So I had been based in Zomba, which was in the central part of Malawi. So I'm now coming a little bit further north, and where I am is in a place called Salima, and it's on the lake shore. Lake Malawi is a huge lake. I think it's one of the third largest of those big lakes, and it almost has a sea influence because it has waves and just like beaches and everything. So it was, let me see now. So yes, so I came back via London, and I met up with my sister Bridget and her husband. And Lucy's daughter was married in London, and her husband came to visit me. And we talked about the work that Lucy was doing and the fact that they had, that they were using their own money and that really we should really do something about it. So that laid a bit of a foundation for something that was going to develop into something much bigger. And within a year of that meeting, and within a year of me coming back, we had actually set up a charity to support the work that was going on out in Malawi. So I think I raised quite a lot of money in that time. I was really enthusiastic.
Would you put a figure on it, Maureen?
A figure?
Yeah.
Thousands, I would say. Yeah, thousands. But I had so many people who supported me during that time. So many really, really good people. People like Lawrence O'Kane in Draperstown Pharmacy. Lawrence, so good, sent medicines out there free of charge that were needed, medicines that they didn't have. When we talk about medical provision here in Ireland and the north and in England, they don't have anything. I mean, they have basic, maybe paracetamols and aspirins, but there was the cases that were being looked after were people with HIV/AIDS, which was in a very, very high percentage of people. Cancers, all sorts, malaria, tuberculosis, all of those diseases, life-threatening. Lawrence would have sent medicines out. I'll tell you the followers I have in Ballinascreen. Maurice Regan, who owns the Market Inn. Maurice would give his facilities, and he has one of his members of staff is Fergus Layden, and my own brother who goes into Reagan's. He and Fergus and Morris would have run dances and various things to make money. And now they have actually developed a dance session once a year, and they make that a fundraiser for Ende Moyo. So, before I go on to the list, there is actually a fundraiser coming up at the Market Inn on Friday, the 6th of May, a date for all your listeners out there who are going to be hopefully listening and taking note. Friday the 6th of May, music by Good Trouble, and donations are £5. The other people around Ballinascreen, Conor Lynch and his dad Dennis Lynch down at the supermarkets, Eurospar. The primary schools in Draperstown, immensely, all so supportive. And I want to tell you a wee story about St. Colum's Primary School in Straw. They actually collect pennies. And those pennies, over a period of a year and a half, I think it was, actually amounted to over £1,300. You know, it's just amazing. Eurospar, they have 4 boxes, and approximately in those boxes, every month, 5 weeks, 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds in pennies and 2p's. So we always say, look after the pennies and the pounds look after themselves. There's no doubt about it that they mount up. You should see Breach and Mickey Lawless and myself counting all these pennies on the kitchen table. Many's a person comes in and has a good laugh at us. Breach and Mickey are 2 brilliant helpers behind the scene. There are many anonymous donors for me. People from Marifelt and Cookstown who donate money to me. They don't want it known. They just give the money because I suppose they know me. They know that I know the charity. I know the people who run it. And I know that the money is used directly for the use of the people who need it out there. So therefore, I guess that's why they're so generous.
Well, would it not be fair to say, Maureen, that might be one of the big hang-ups that people has as regards giving money to charity? The fact that it all gets there? I
think it's singularly the most important question that people now ask when you are out fundraising. Is the money going direct? Well, I can say to you, as I've said to anybody I talk to, I know with my hand on my heart that every penny that goes out, every penny that we get goes, we have a trustees, it's an official charity. There are 8 trustees. I've been a trustee for 10 years. We have a treasurer, we have a chair, we have really professional business people who look after the charity, and not one member of the trustees takes a penny out of that for their services to the charity. Not even now postage stamps, or we do everything. Letters, they're all done by each individual. So every penny that goes out goes for the benefit. Now, obviously, over the years, I have to tell you that before I actually go on, I also want to say to you that the other people, donors who subscribe over the years by direct debit on a monthly basis, that amounts to, people give £5 a month. It amounts sometimes to £300 and £400 a month. Amazing to know that that amount of money is coming in, and that's from Ballinascreen. That's from Ballinascreen, not to talk about the other people who have their contacts, and lots of volunteers. The volunteers who come in behind you when you're fundraising and want to help. And I want to tell you very briefly another lovely story. There's a guy who's well known in Ballinascreen, John Conlon is his name. He actually lives in Marifelt. 2 years ago, on his 75th birthday, he walked from Mizzen in Cork to Malin in Donegal, and he raised something in the region of 17 to 18,000 pounds for the charity because he had been out in Malawi. So we're saying that was 2004. I've been out at the centre 2004, 2006, 2011, 2013 for 3 months on each occasion. Now, over that period of 11 years, 11 plus, the centre has grown obviously from nothing, just Lucy and Tony working from home with the villagers, to having a centre. They call it Endi Moyo, and the translation of Endi Moyo is the place giving life, and that's exactly what it does. Every day the villagers come, they walk, they come on bicycles, they come in ways and means that we have no idea. Transportation, you see people walking miles and miles and miles just to get help. And what they get at Endimoyo, they get a cup of tea and they get a bun. Unheard of in any place. There are hospitals I've been to. We have no idea. I have seen 2 patients in a bed, and I've seen a 3rd patient under a bed in hospitals, but not at Endimoyo. Every patient is treated as an individual, and they are given dignity, respect, hope, tender, loving care. And the numbers have grown from whatever number would have arrived at the doors in the village to now over 1,000 people have been helped. Now, a lot of people, it's palliative care, and it's not a work that is maybe, because it is for people who are very, very ill, dying, who need a lot of help. Now the charity has grown to the point where they actually have a new centre, and it's about to be opened later this year, because the demand for the service and the dignity that they receive at the centre, the place has grown that it's beyond. The place they have now is so small, it just can't cater for the people who are coming. They have an ambulance. Twice a month, they go out to the villages. The ambulance, I say, it rocks and rolls through the countryside, because quite often there aren't any roads. It's through the bushes. And it rocks and rolls, and it brings the patients in, and they come in on 2 days in the month, and they get a full dinner. And that dinner, when I was there, was being cooked on an open fire. If you can imagine 5 or 6 bricks out in the backyard, and sticks put in and lit, and the saucepans on top of that. That's how they cook their food, in huge, huge saucepans. And those patients, and they get a huge plate of food. Some of them take half of the food home with them, because they want to share it with somebody at home. Now, I've actually been out. I've been in the villages. I have been out with the people. I have been in their homes. I have seen the poverty. I've seen children who can't go to school because there is no money for books, no money for uniforms. They have no money for the small amount of fees that might be required. And I have visited schools where there are, in one primary school class that I went into, there were 147 children. The pictures are all in there, in that book, in one classroom. Now, seats, chairs, desks, non-existent. They sit on the floor. So now Endimoyo has developed, part of its work is to look after the children of the families of patients. So they would visit the families, the patient comes in, is assessed, and they have a full assessment of their history done, from birth to the time they arrive. And if a patient is attending and being treated at Endimoyo, then they are put on the register and they are visited at their home. If they are unable to come into the centre, then the ambulance or one of the cars goes out for them, brings them in, and the children are assessed. They get exercise books, pencils, they get mats to sleep on. Now, I'm talking about a straw mat is what the children sleep on. Sometimes it's, the nearest I can get is, we have maize bags, and I have seen children lying on maize bags on a muddy floor in a rondavel, and no windows, just a door. I wrote a piece in 2013, my last visit there, and it was just my memory, just my reflections, some of my reflections. One of them is vivid in my mind. There was this lady, Gloria, and we visited her. She was lying on a mattress given by Enda Moyo in her backyard, and she had cancer, so she was dying. But she was given medication to ease her pain. She was given blankets. This lady was educated, and she spoke the most beautiful English for a native Malawian. Her English was beautifully spoken. And on my last visit, I write in this here, 1 hour before, I had visited her many times during the 3 months, but 1 hour before I left Malawi, I went with Lucy to visit Gloria. And she was lying out in the backyard with chickens around her and hens and dogs, right? And she's dying. And she's in pain. And Lucy is attending to her medical needs and seeing to all of that. And I just got down on the ground, on the mud, and I just sat beside her, and I rubbed her hands and I rubbed her legs because they were sore. And then when I was leaving, I said to her, I'm going home today, Gloria. And I took her in my arms and I held her. And she said to me, Maureen, please pray that the pain will go away. And she died 6 weeks later.
Goodness me.
Now, that's only one story of hundreds.
I can imagine that, yeah. Getting back to the fundraising again, Maureen, was there any governmental funding or anything of that kind from wherever?
No government funding at all in Malawi, and I would suspect in many other countries in Africa as well. Every penny that runs Enda Moyo in Salima comes from fundraising.
And would you say that the biggest amount of people that was going to we'll say weren't aware would be probably our PJ. Mm-hmm. They do start a fundraising where what countries you travel in, all a lot of countries throughout the world. And you finish up back in Ballinascreen again. Back in
Ballinascreen.
I thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy, very, very much.